Hello, folks. Welcome to the Genuinely Interested podcast. Another week, another episode. And I'm your host, Roy Bensby. And I'm happy that you're listening. This week, I have Paul Hilton, who is a conservation photojournalist. He's been doing this for a very long time. And if you go check out his Instagram, you'll see some of the photos that he posts from the wildlife trade, from pangolins, from the palm oil destruction and what that does to orangutans, to elephants, and what's going on with shark fins. So really, just wherever there's an industry that's using and exploiting animals, Paul tries to get there and document it and hopefully shed some light on it and bring it to public opinion and public awareness. We need more people like that. I love his work. I think it's very important because animals, the environment, trees, forests, oceans, they don't have a voice. They don't have a PR system behind them. They don't have lobbyists. So they need to have people who will advocate for them and speak up for them either verbally or through images or documentaries, whatever the format is. You know, it's crucial that someone does it. So he does a great job, and he's a super nice guy. When we spoke, it was 7:30 a.m. on the Sunshine Coast, sunny Australia. So we are, I believe, 14 hours behind. And I think this was the first podcast I've done with someone in Australia, which is really, it's pretty cool. I've been to Australia when I was, I believe, early 20s. I was there for about 6 months. It's a beautiful country. I didn't even, only explored, a small percentage. It's a massive, massive country. So hopefully I can get out there maybe after this whole thing ends. Guys, when you go on the iTunes or Spotify, if you can subscribe, review the podcast, I really appreciate it. It gives us a little bump in on the iTunes pages, so it helps out. I don't want to talk about that too much. I just hope you enjoy the episodes and this episode specifically. So without further ado, here is the awesome Paul Hilton.
The Genuinely Interested Podcast.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
Yeah, great. How are you?
Good, thanks. Thanks for coming on the show. I wanted to have you on for a while, so I really appreciate you taking the time.
No, for sure. It's it's good to chat in these uncertain times. I'm all for it.
Yeah. Good morning. How's Australia in the morning? It's like 7:30 a.m., right?
Yeah, 7:30 a.m. and we're sort of the weather's just turned. It's starting to cool down a bit. So, but it's a great place to be during the COVID lockdown. Been really happy about being in Australia. Huge country, low population, and it's obviously helped contain the outbreak. So, it's been good for me and the family, actually. I've only been here 12 months. Before that, I was based in Indonesia, and then before that, China. So, it's probably, I timed it right being back in Australia.
Yeah, I could say that. Yeah. Where in Australia?
I'm on the Sunshine Coast. So there's a place called Noosa, which is quite famous.
Is that Queensland?
The Queensland. It's an hour and a half north of Brisbane.
Okay, yeah,
on the coast.
I mean, I don't know, not specifically there, but I've been. I drove all along the coast many years back. So beautiful.
Well,
area.
Yeah, you probably would have come through this area. Where are you based? Where are you calling from?
So right now, physically in Connecticut, but originally in New York. We just came to Connecticut about 2 months ago because New York was just getting a little bit unbearable. You really couldn't leave the house too much. And
New York City, in the city?
New York City, yeah, and in Brooklyn.
Yeah. Okay, well,
you couldn't do too much, so we decided there's a house here that we could come to in Connecticut, and it's been so much better. We have 2 dogs. There's a backyard. There's hiking trails in the area, so it's been a really nice change of pace for us.
Yeah, a little bit of nature on your doorstep really helps, right? So you go.
Oh, it's unbelievable. It's just it almost makes you a completely different person. Having that accessibility having some green, some fresher air, it just, you almost automatically become a little bit calmer, a little bit almost nicer in a way.
Well, no, they've done a lot of research and sort of housing communities where they do have access to green areas and parks and stuff. The level of stress and sort of domestic violence goes down, and it just shows that having nature close by really, it's just good for everybody. So it's
believe it.
Really,
I believe it.
Really important. Yeah.
So can you maybe tell us a little bit about your background, how you started photography?
Oh, it's a long how I started photography. Well, now I'm a conservation photojournalist.
We have time. Yeah,
that's sort of how I sort of title myself. I do wear a few different hats within that realm. But my photography, I picked up my first camera when I was about 15, I think. It was my mum's camera, and we were down on holiday in the Snowy Mountains. And I remember and the Snowy Mountains, for people that don't know, it's sort of Australia's sort of alpine region. It's only 1,000 meters, or I don't know what you'd call it, maybe, what's that, just over 400 feet. But we do get snow up there, and this sort of bushland does change. And at the time, there's a lot of snow on the ground. And I remember just walking off with a camera and trying to photograph these stunning rosellas. They're beautiful. They're crimson rosella. They're stunning blue and red against the contrast of the white and the green trees. And I just really enjoyed that time, and sort of that stayed with me. And I really, just enjoyed taking those pictures and just me being in the great outdoors with a camera. But growing up, there's no way I could make a living out of this. I mentioned it once to my dad, and he said, "Stop dreaming, get a real job," he said.
Yeah.
And so, after I basically graduated from high school, and then was going to go into parks and wildlife, which is like a diploma in, I don't know, probably the equivalent of your rangers in Yellowstone National Park or something, where you become a Parks and Wildlife warden for a national park. And I thought about, well, that would be pretty cool, because I'd always been into nature. I just was sort of always, grew up always around it. And I was pretty passionate about being in the great outdoors and just the environment and conservation really at that age. So I thought about that. And then I realized, I don't really want to be 21, 22 stuck in the Australian outback. I was too curious about the great outdoors and the big wide world. So instead of doing that diploma, I decided I was going to travel and see the world and decide sort of what I want to do, how I'm going to actually make it in this life. So I ended up in a combi van 12 months around Australia.
Oh, wow.
Managed to get myself a camera at the time. It wasn't a great camera. And I ended up spending time on the road, and the van, the combi van, became pretty much a bit of a animal hospital, because I don't know if you spent time in Australia on the road. There's a lot of roadkill, a lot of injured animals.
It's unbelievable. Australia is massive. For people who don't know, it's almost the size of the U.S. It's unbelievably huge, and with what, like a tenth of the population, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. So, and unfortunately, the things haven't really changed. This huge, this roadkill is actually out of control
Really?
in Australia. Millions of species are killed every year because everyone's driving so fast. In some states now, they do have wildlife corridors to crossing roads and stuff. It is changing, but obviously in Queensland, where I am now, it's still pretty backwards in many ways, unfortunately. But anyway, so the combi van became this animal hospital, and at one stage, I think we had an injured a blue-tongued lizard, which is a beautiful sort of member of the skink family, about a foot long, beautiful animal. It eats fruit. That was fine. And then we had a water python, which was about 4.5 foot, harmless, a restrictor. And then there was a galah, which is sort of one of the Australian parrots. And it was just constant, between people hitchhiking us, giving them lifts, and managing the animals. It just became a bit of a traveling circus almost. But it was fun days, good days, you know. And I was photographing out on the road, and and that sort of we had sort of odd jobs here and there around. I ended up in Darwin, in the top end of Australia, which is a pretty wild part of the Northern Territory. We've got some great national parks up there, Kakadu National Park, stunning area. I ended up, teaching windsurfing on a beach up there, and just making extra cash where I could. And so after about 12 months, pretty much did the whole loop of Australia. Still got so much more to see. But those animals were released, and it just went on like that for 12 months, where you were looking, saving animals along the way, and just having a good time and just trying to work it out. At the time I was 18, 19, and then I ended up spending some time, and I ended up going overseas. I ended up in Europe, in London. Because I'd met a lot of people on the road. I had contacts in London, and they said, come over and stay with us in the UK. I ended up over there, and while I was there, I registered on a course. It was a foundation course of photography at the Kennington School of Photography, and I think it was only about a 6-week course, but I really enjoyed it. It really thoroughly explained things. It was obviously back in the day of film and transparency, and we talked about flash photography and learned about darkroom and developing. So it was really, really useful. And that gave me a bit more confidence. And then from Europe, I ended up in Hong Kong because I had another contact out there. And so all that time I was always taking photographs. And then I met this Dutch photographer who used to work for the news agencies like AFP, Anjan French Press. So he had a lot of experience, but then he was in the commercial side of stuff. And so I ended up convincing him to give me a job as an assistant, which he did after he told me my portfolio was terrible and my images were out of focus. he sort of really burst my bubble, so to speak, and told me that my photography was pretty average, but it was great. Sorry?
But he liked you.
Yeah, for sure. We got on well, so he gave me a go, and so I ended up working with him as an assistant, and he just taught me the business side of the industry, which these days anyone can pick up a camera, especially now it's all digital. Anyone can pick up a camera and take a wonderful photograph, and they can get lucky time and time again. They can just keep shooting and until they get it right. But it's only 20% of the job. You know what I mean? The shooting bit's the easy bit. It's actually taking an image and knowing how you're going to actually turn that into, turn that into credits, turn that into putting food on the table. So he taught me a lot. And he was hard sometimes. He pushed me. I ended up working crazy hours. We're doing a lot of big hotel shoots with different lighting. So would go into a hotel, for example, and back in the day when you shot transparency film, color temperature of lights was so different. So you had to literally put different colored gels on all the lights in the ceilings, and sometimes it would just take hours. You'd have to lift out every tube, a fluorescent tube, and put like a magenta gel on it to color balance it to make it daylight. So once you took that photograph, the color balance was all the same. You wouldn't have different colored light temperatures throughout the image. So you could just get imagine. It was so tedious.
And for people who don't know, now all you have to do is you're playing around in the computer while the photographer is shooting. It does it automatically, right? You don't even have to do it.
Color balance, or you can do a white balance. But literally, you can go to the color, coding in Photoshop, and you change the color like that. But we literally had to do it manually. And you think of a big conference room that sits 200 people, and you've got all these fluorescent tubes. So we'd literally have to go and pull out each fluorescent tube, cover it it was a magenta gel which would balance it out. It would have light meters then and color balances, color meters, and it would give you the temperature. I think every daylight's 5,600 Kelvin. So you've got to balance it to that. Anyway, it was tedious and it went on, but once again, it taught me a lot. And then I, at the same time, while I was working for Michel, I ended up, his name was Michel Porro, actually. He's got a studio now in Amsterdam. I still keep in contact with him. He's a good guy. So where was I? So then during that time, I was doing sort of pro bono work or for any of the wildlife groups in Hong Kong at the time. And there wasn't a lot going on. Hong Kong's a big city, but actually there's quite a lot of country park. And so I ended up doing some stuff for WWF. It was a year of the tiger, and obviously being in part of China, or well, that's debatable. But being in that region, they do celebrate Chinese New Year and the Chinese zodiacs, and it was a year of the tiger, and I ended up in some safari park taking pictures of tigers for a calendar for WWF, and so I started that relationship. And then at the same time I ended up working for Animals Asia Foundation, which is a group that works within China to rescue bears from bear bile farming. And they asked me to come along and document the rescue of these bears. And that was sort of the sort of turning point where I realized that not only do I love photography, but I could follow my passion of conservation and wildlife issues through photography. And from that, shooting the bear rescue, I think, and one of my images ran in National Geographic. It's in 2001 or 2002. And then made me realize that there was a way to actually follow sort of my dream, so to speak. But so it went through stages of doing the corporate work, commercial work, and then transitioning to the wildlife and conservation, because they didn't pay as well. So I used both of them at the time to sort of pay the bills, but also follow what I really wanted to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's there's a lot of parallels, like with in my life, or at least I know in a few other industries, where you have startups, for example, where you want to focus all your energy and all your time in that startup, but you're not making money for a good year or two or three. So you want to supplement that with a little extra, side gigs that you do or freelance work that you do for a few years while you kind of work on your passion project. So it's a little bit similar.
Yeah, and that's sort of how it evolved. But remember, at the time, there was no one there giving me advice on how to do it, or there wasn't like a clear roadmap. I was just trying to navigate it. And at the time, it wasn't easy. But then, then I ended up, after that sort of period, I ended up. It was, so what was that? Bear bile farming. What was it? I documented that in early 2000s, 2001, 2003. And you can actually check out the wonderful work they're doing. It's Animals Asia Foundation. And go have a look at their stuff. They're rescuing these bears in China. They're on these farms, and there's still 10,000 of them in captivity. And it's probably one of the most cruel practices. But go and have a look and give them support if you can, because they're doing such wonderful work. It's run by Jill Robinson, and she's an amazing person. She's dedicated her whole life to saving these bears. But sadly, it is still going on. But go check it out.
I read that. I actually had Mark Beckoff maybe like last month on, and he's also he's been researching animals his whole life, and he was also talking about Animals Asia. He has a good relationship with Jill, and he mentioned them as well. So that's and I've been following that for years. I think of all the practices, if you take circuses, I don't know, all the different horrific things, SeaWorld, et cetera, et cetera. Sure. I feel like bear bile farms has to be the worst. It's just putting these bears in a cage for, I don't know, a decade so they can't move.
Yeah, even like some of them more than 2 decades, and they're in these cages. Literally, they call them crusher cages, and the bottom actually can move up. So when they want to extract bile, these bears are sort of just locked into position, and they just drain bile from these catheters. It's permanently in their gallbladder, and they're in these conditions for decades. And then someone like Animals Asia comes along, Jill Robertson, and they rescue these bears and they get them out of these crusher cages, and they just don't know what to do when they put their feet on grass. They're just so used to standing on cement or steel bars. And you should see the changes that go on when one of these bears actually gets to stand on the grass again. It's just so sad, and it shouldn't be happening in 2020. But let's hope with COVID, people start to think a little bit more. All I can do is be hopeful on those kind of issues. Yeah.
I actually read I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I read that they're actually doing more bear bile farms now because they believe that somehow whatever they extract from these bears can help with COVID.
Yeah, I've read that, but just after,
and they use any excuse. I mean, now it's COVID. Last year would be something else. 10 years from now, they just keep on making excuses to keep this.
Well, it's fabricated from the market, the businessmen, the traders. They're actually pushing this product. They just fabricate it, and that's how it goes. And it's all about a good sales pitch. And unfortunately, a lot of people are quite gullible and believe it. And people they want to believe in a cure. They want to believe in something positive, so they'll go with it. Sadly, So anyway, So I'll just continue a little bit. There's something I wanted to say about. So 2001, 2002, that was the bear bile farming, and then just after that. And you probably know that 2002, 2003, I transitioned from Michelle as a corporate photographer, and I started working for the news agencies. And these are, the news agencies where you see news photographs in newspapers. The big ones are like AFP, Reuters, AP. But there was a new startup in Hong Kong at the time, and it was European Press Photo Agency. So they gave me a contract where I would literally be on the street and I could go and shoot economic features. I could go and shoot environmental features. I had free reign to go and just shoot at something but it had to have a news angle. I had to peg something to it to do with the economy, to do with the environment. And it was actually really interesting time. But at that same time, when I took that contract, Hong Kong went into the SARS outbreak, which came from China, which it was another coronavirus, and it came out of the markets in Guangzhou, which is a southern city, and they pinned it to a civet cat, which was being consumed in these markets. Now present day COVID, it's obviously similar to the Wuhan outbreak as far as we know. The same situation. And so I was up there photographing these animals in these markets, and like I said, just the conditions these animals were kept in. It's surprising this hasn't happened more often, with these virus and outbreaks. Just the conditions, the cages stacked on top of each other. I asked one of the owners what they have for sale, and he said everything in the sky, everything on the land, everything in the ocean. At the time there was leopard cats, there was mongoose, there was some kind of huge water rats, different species of birds, domestic animals, cats and dogs, all put into this, in this market stacked on top of each other. And I've got one photograph I will never forget. You've got a whole wall of raccoon dogs, and these are bred for their fur and their consumption, for meat consumption. And so you've got a whole wall of raccoon dogs. And then next door, literally on the floor next to these cages, you've got a woman and her little child, and she's washing dishes literally next to where all these animals are, and it just goes to show how unhygienic a lot of these places are, and how these viruses can just jump. So that was a real wake up call for me to actually really see that. And now, fast forward, yeah, it's still going on, and things haven't really changed from that, which is really sad.
Yeah, it's argument I hear a lot. Especially people here in the U.S. will say, "What can we do?" Over in China, they're eating bats and pangolins and shark fin soup,
Yeah.
dog, cats, tigers, elephants, tusks, bear bile, like you name it. Like you said, anything under the sky, but all those things are happening in China. Like, what can we do? Here, obviously in the U.S., there's CAFOs, which is horrific, but it's I don't think it's nowhere near as horrific as what's going on over in China. And people here,
but the
they know how
US,
to affect change in Asia.
But the US is the second biggest consumer of wildlife and wildlife products, to do with your exotic pet trade as well. So yeah, it is. It's obviously China's got some big issues going on. A lot of Asia, in Indonesia, they eat a lot of bats and primates and other species. But I think it's definitely a global problem because these markets are all over the world. And I think what it really comes down to is our sort of relationship with wild and domestic animals. And we've abused them for so long. And even within sort of the factory farming, industrial farming of, cows and chickens and for pigs, it's the same thing. It's just disrespect for these animals and disregard for life. And I think everybody really needs to think about their interaction with these wild animals. I think because if not, we are going to end up in this place again. And if we get through COVID, we don't know if it's going to mutate. We don't know if we're going to get a vaccine. It might be here to stay. And I don't know, will we ever get to the bottom of it? Actually, how did it start? Obviously we know it came from a bat initially, but that host species in between, I know there's a lot of people saying that it was started in China and from this lab, but there's no proof, there's no evidence right now. But whether we get
of conspiracy theories out there right now, it's way too many.
Yeah, exactly. And I heard within sort of my sort of contacts that while animals were being sold out of the Wuhan lab after they've been tested on, that's possible, it's feasible, but at the same time there is no hard evidence. So I just think we just have to be careful about throwing these theories out there, because until we have proof, we'll never know. But it would be nice to find out if the pangolin was that host before we got to the markets. I think there's only like a 91% match, and it needs to be a 99% match, really. So,
I think right now we're a little bit. Everyone's in limbo. We don't really know what's going on. We don't know if this thing is going to end tomorrow or 5 years from now. We don't know if the vaccine is coming, when it's coming, who's going to be able to have access to it when it does arrive. So there's a lot of question marks, and I think nobody really knows. But just a few questions. So as far as you take anybody that goes on your website or Instagram, the pictures are hard to see sometimes. But I've always wondered, how do you take these pictures of people or industries that are obviously, they're not working with you. You're working, quote unquote, against them. You wish to shut them down. And are they not like suspicious or hostile towards you when you try to take pictures?
Yeah. It's a good question. They're definitely hostile towards me. And I try and get into a lot of these situations, get in really quick, and it's better to beg for forgiveness and ask for permission. As soon as you ask for permission, you'll get shut down. So in a way, people might disagree with that, but if I don't get in and take an image before someone shuts me down, then the world's not going to see these images. They're not going to see what I see. And I'm quite good at getting into these areas and getting these images to start these conversations, for people to be able to really see and make their own choices and decisions and have those conversations. So there's been times where I've been chased down the roads. I've been hit around the legs with crowbars. I've been threatened with my life. I've been arrested. I've been held up by military in different places around the world. Yeah, you just sort of get used to it, and just each situation, you just have to. It's a calculated risk on how far I can push it and what I need to do. But I think the hardest thing I've had to deal with is learning how to document these issues and be able to let go, as in, don't hold on to them. So I have peace of mind. And it took me a while to get my head around that. I thought I was invincible. I could keep photographing and not feel anything. But it does sort of catch up with you, and you really need to do some personal work to be able to continue doing this line of work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's actually one of my questions. I mean, how do you, there's, I think Mark something, I forget his name, but I think he's the founder of Animal Hope and Wellness, and they rescue these dogs from China that are basically going to be, meat. And I mean, these again, horrific photos, just like dogs being tortured. And he says, like, I don't sleep at night. And, someone like you, like yourself, that documents really animals from orangutans to pangolins to everything in between. And you see horrific things sometimes. Doesn't that stay with you? How do you?
Yeah, I do get a bit of PTS, post-traumatic stress from time to time with different species, elephants particularly, when I've photographed them and sort of stayed with me for a while. And I've had to just do my job, but take a step back, as in, don't be so attached to that image. Don't be so attached to that situation. Even though I want to get in there and rescue them and or get involved, I can't. I have to keep some distance. And I've got myself into a good place. I sleep very well at night through meditation, and just, sometimes I'll come back after a heavy assignment and just train for 2 weeks. I'll cycle, I'll jog. A lot of physical activity helps me clear my mind, and through meditation, yoga, and just having a good support group around me, some good friends and family really helps. But there was a while there, maybe, I don't know, during the sort of release of Racing Extinction, I was sort of really doing a lot of undercover shark fin investigations, and yeah, it does get you down, and you do have to keep it in check, and you do have to manage it. Like I said, but I'm in a good place. But there was times there where I didn't realize that it was having an effect on, on my personal life and how I felt. But no, I've got to. Like I said, it's up to everyone to work out how they can manage these situations. Because a lot of, I suppose I'm more of a conservationist with a camera than a photographer as a, conservationist, as in a lot of the conservationists burn out, because they've seen so much, and the wins are few and far between, and you end up just getting, bitter and twisted about the situation, and that's not going to help anybody. So I think you need to just work out and just do some personal growth work. Everyone needs to look inside a little bit. And I think you need to do it in life anyway. It doesn't matter where you are, what career you're doing, or what you're doing in life. Sometimes you really need to stop and have a good look in the mirror and work out, where your headspace is and how you manage that, how you manage your resources. Conservation starts right here, kind of thing.
Yeah. It's definitely an uphill battle. I mean, it's you fix one. It's kind of like one of those leaks. You fix one leak and 27 other leaks spring up, and then you're putting your fingers trying to fix all of them, but it seems like an uphill battle sometimes. And
it is.
I salute anybody that stays that keeps grinding and keeps doing it. It's amazing.
Yeah, so I just yesterday in the news, I don't know if you saw it, and you probably wouldn't unless it was on your radar, but Hong Kong had a huge bust of something like 36,000. No, sorry, it's 24 tons or even 28 tons of shark fin. Now that's equivalent to almost 40,000 sharks. And they were thresher sharks and silky sharks, both CITES protected. So they do have some protection. And the thing is, back in sort of 2005, 2006, me and another colleague, we set up the Hong Kong Shark Foundation and created a book called Managed Shark. I documented the shark fin trade for over 10 years and literally put my life and soul into to raising the bar so when people would sit down to eat a bowl of shark fin soup, they really know what they're supporting. So I documented it in Africa and the Middle East and in Asia and really got these books, Managed Shark, into Hong Kong universities and schools. It was the first bilingual book on shark finning and what that involves when they sat down. And I think consumption was going down for a while, but it seems to be spiking again, and still a lot of product is moving into those markets. And it's just constant. And it's sad at the same time. To me, the world gets less wild every day, and that really pisses me off.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. I feel exactly the same. Have you seen? Would you say you've seen the situation from when you started in Hong Kong to maybe last year when you were there? Are things better? Are things worse? Are things the same? How would you?
I would say no. I would say in general, the younger crowd in Hong Kong definitely don't have boycotted shark fin soup, but it's the older generation. The baby boomers, they're still pushing for it, and a lot within the Chinese family, the younger generation has much more respect for the elders than so we do in the West, and they sort of just have toe the line, and so I think the younger generation way more informed, and they do want to make change, but it's just going to take time for the older generation to move on, and whether the species is going to survive, I don't know. And I people like, wow, why should I care about sharks? And it's I don't expect people to love sharks, but we really need them in that ocean realm to manage that system. And a lot of our fisheries depend on the health of shark stocks. They regulate the fisheries and keep things in check. And they are really important. And when you're taking literally 100 million to 200 million sharks out a year, the ocean cannot sustain those numbers. And being an apex predator, it has huge knock-on effect to the other species within the ocean realm. So it is a huge issue. And once again, people really need to know that they need to be in that place, whether they love them or not, and they think they've got big teeth and they don't want to go swimming because they think they're going to be bit by a shark. It's way bigger than that, and more chance of getting in a car accident, getting bitten by a shark. But,
yeah. I mean, it's definitely scary, a shark, but the odds of you seeing a shark in your life in the ocean are pretty much zilch. And it is true that, and I don't think people maybe know this, but whenever you take an apex predator, there was a famous video a few years back about when they reintroduced the wolves back into Yellowstone, I believe. And
yes, I love that.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And, for anyone who just write wolves, Yellowstone, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And it's the same thing. You need these apex predators. They keep all the rest of the ecosystem in check. Doesn't matter if it's wolves or bears or sharks and whales. You need those in those ecosystems. And it's just, I had the other day I had Captain Paul Watson from Sea Shepherd. And he was talking, about whales, but he was talking, the same thing we're talking about right now. And I think it's an educational thing that needs to happen because people just don't correlate the two. They're like, we don't really care about whatever is happening in the ocean. It's far away from us.
Exactly. People always, if the koala goes extinct or if this goes, it doesn't matter. But it really, really does have a knock-on effect. Like on the eastern seaboard of the US, off New York, I know that years ago there was a huge blue shark fishery in the Atlantic Ocean there, and they weren't managing the shark quotas properly, and then your whole scallop fishery collapsed. And why that was is because they were taking out all the apex predators, all the blue shark, and those blue sharks normally feed on stingrays and keep the stingrays in check. But because they took out all the sharks, the stingrays were increasing, and they obviously feed on scallops. And so the scallop industry collapsed because it had a knock-on effect from the blue shark fishery. So if people, like I said, don't love sharks, understand that they provide services. Every species provides services for us that we can't even imagine, the level of detail that goes into keeping systems in place. And ultimately, it's every time we lose a species, we're one step closer to our demise. It is that black and white. Biodiversity creates ecosystems. Ecosystems keep the planet functioning. So it's really important every time we do lose a species. It's a big issue for the human race. And so people really need to stop and just think about that for a moment.
Yeah. And there's so many stories where we try to introduce species that are foreign to there's that famous story in Australia where they introduced the toads because they thought they would eat.
The cane toad. Oh my God. Yeah, it's still going on.
And now you have billions of these toads running around Australia, just demolishing everything in their path. They're an invasive species. And there's so many of these stories where we thought we could bring an animal to this place where it's not natural for it to be, and catastrophic things happen, for biodiversity in that area. So we think we have a God complex where we think we can do whatever we want with nature, that we're not part of nature, that we're above it. And, time and time again, we see that.
Welcome to 2020, planet Earth. Here we are. COVID-19's come to give us a little wake-up call.
I hope people remember this, because we tend to have a short memory. We tend to not remember these type of things 3, 4, 5 years from now. So I do hope people remember and take this into some sort of consideration.
Well, we've got runaway climate change too. I don't think we're going to get away with it this easy, mate. I'm a big believer in we reap what we sow. And unfortunately, I think things are going to get a lot worse before they're ever going to get any better, because it's just disrespect for the natural world. It's that simple. And we can't keep going. As a society, we need to start working with nature, not against it. It's that simple. Until that happens, I think things aren't going to really change too much, unfortunately.
So earlier you mentioned Racing Extinction, which is, again, it's a theme, it's a documentary. Everyone should watch it. I loved it. I watched it in the cinema. So how was that experience working with some of those photographers, filmmakers, activists? What was that experience like?
Working with Luis Ahoyas, he's a legend, great guy. I love his passion. I love his vision. And I don't know if you saw the film Game Changers.
Of course, yeah.
Vegan athletes. I think that really highlighted an issue that people could really think about and get involved and adopt better eating habits. But Racing Extinction, it was a big film, it was a big story. Okay, I was in it, but it's a big message. And the way they sort of brought all those different story threads into that film, I think it was brilliant. Working with Sean, me and him have been mates for many years. He does a lot of the same kind of stuff. The whole team, great crowd of people to work with. And those markets that we investigated, the whale shark investigation within the film, we ended up shutting them down, and now there's no whale sharks being processed up in that area. I was just told recently, one of my contacts was up there in that region, and there was no whale sharks being processed anymore. So that was great. A small win there. But overall it was a great experience. Much more.
Do you take those wins as motivation to, that propel you forward? Like, okay, great. We got one. Great. Now I'm motivated to do the next thing, or it doesn't matter. You're going to do what you need to do regardless.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's nice to know you did do something and did make a difference on something. Look, I'll just, this is what I do. I'll keep doing what I do. I think it's important. And, I think I'm quite good at it. So yeah, like I said, it just, everyone has their way of dealing with stuff, and I justify it in my own head. I don't know, however I do. I just going to keep doing what I do. I think it's important. So, it's you have good days and bad days, and one of those, when you hear about that, you go, okay, we did something good. It feels good. But that's not my motivation, really, because a lot, like I said, most days in the conservation world is like, oh, really, another depressing story, really. You think it's going to get any worse, and it does, and you go, oh, here we go. So.
I mean, your photos have such, I would characterize it as humanity. You look at the pictures and you see, a piece of you in those animals. Is that something that you try to get across? I mean, when you're looking at like an orangutan and you're looking into the eyes, you're almost like seeing its soul, and you're almost like seeing what it's asking you or thanking you, or, whatever it is that picture is trying to get across. Is that something that, you're actively trying to get across?
Oh, for sure. I'm always trying to get that connection with, really look into their eyes and really make that connection. And they're 97% human. Really, there's not, but, their realm, they just don't have, mortgages and credit cards. I think they've got it good. If we left their forests alone, I think life would be good. Sitting up there looking across the, the Sumatran jungle at the next fruit tree, and without all the stress, having siestas. No, yeah, of course. Because mate, they have feelings. They're just like us, and yeah, I always try and relay that in my imagery to make that connection and people to feel something when they look at an image, rather than just move on to the next thing. The world, the way we view things now, everyone's got a attention span of a mosquito, but yeah. But so I like to hope that sometimes people actually stop and look at my images, even if it's a few extra seconds. That's all I can do, and make that connection with the natural world.
So we mentioned the orangutans. Can you explain to people about the palm oil industry and why it's so incredibly disastrous to these animals and to the ecosystems that they live in?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, a lot of the last equatorial rainforests of the world, there is a push to exploit these resources. And I've obviously spent a lot of time, over a decade, in the Losa ecosystem, which is the last place on Earth where they have tigers, rhinos, elephants, and orangutans under the same canopy. So it's a really biodiverse hotspot. It's a really, really important block of forest. And it's still quite a big forest block. So it has viable populations of these species that nowhere else does. So that's why I put a lot of effort into sort of documenting and working within that area. But sadly, you have palm oil, and it's a monoculture where forests are bulldozed down, and literally everything is cut down. It's burned. The land's drained because a lot of these areas are peat swamps, and then they plant out these palm oil, and some of it's legal, some of it's illegal. And the thing is, they just clear huge amounts of land, like thousands of hectares. And when that happens, you allow areas of forests to be opened up. When they put roads through to these plantations, these areas of forest get opened up, and then poachers get in there. They have easier access to these areas. And it's basically, the whole system collapses once these species are taken out. So I think there is a big call for boycotting palm oil, but at the same time, the world's a really hungry place, and it's used in biofuels. It's used in 50-60% of products on the supermarket shelf. Yeah. So there's no way we can really replace it. What needs to happen is the whole industry needs to be reformed. It needs to have a deforestation policy, no more cutting down, hardwoods and rainforests in 2020. There's a lot of old agricultural land that could be converted to palm oil, and I think it just needs better management. They did create the a round table of sustainable palm oil. It's supposed to be organic palm oil, but it's still that mechanisms sort of failed. It hasn't really happened, but it's a start in the right direction. And I think it comes down to governments, especially Indonesia and Malaysia, to really decide on their future and how they want to do it, because they've got such huge tourism potential in these areas. But unfortunately, in and around the Losa ecosystem, there's not huge amounts of infrastructure for ecotourism. And I think that would really change things. And it's just, it's sort of between the lobbyists of the palm oil plantations and the conservationists, it's just a constant war trying to protect these areas before, too much is cleared to lose this forest. It's a complex, very complex issue. So as consumers, people can really sort of try and push how they spend their dollars. And right now, if they can boycott it and without too much hassle, I think it's good. It will help. But obviously a lot of people need to do it. It's a complex issue, and palm oil could work in a lot of these areas if there was other crops, other plants planted in with it. Because at the moment, when you have this monoculture, everything is lost. But they could actually do it in a way where there are forestry species within these plantations. But then obviously you need a lot more land. So yeah, it needs a lot of thought, and it just needs to be reformed. And we need to stop cutting down rainforests in 2020. Basically, trees need to be better protected.
How helpful or how corrupt are the governments in those areas?
Sadly, Indonesia is the corruption culture runs right through the country, and my father-in-law actually worked there. He was ex-Hong Kong police, and then he worked in anti-corruption for a long time. And he had a contract in Indonesia to help them work out and deal with corruption at top level. And literally after a year of compiling this report and putting, checks and balances, putting instruments in place so they can actually work on this to improve corruption, they literally took the whole report and put everything in the drawer, locked it in the drawer, and threw away the key, and basically ticked a box saying that they've worked on anti-corruption this year, and that's just to sort of show that they're actively working on it. But once again, the political will has to be there. I think it has improved somewhat. Up in Losa ecosystem where I've been working, the first time there was this rogue palm oil company called Calista Alarm, and they were charged something like $26 million in damages for illegally clearing the Tripa peat swamp, which is part of the Losa ecosystem. But sadly, to this date, I don't think they have paid those charges, because a lot of that money was going to be put back into rehabilitation of that area, and so it's still ongoing. But they were found guilty and prosecuted, but so it's an ongoing battle, really.
I mean, I a lot of my childhood I grew up in Africa, and it's kind of embedded into the fabric of society. It's almost expected, like police officers and government officials to pay them. They don't even bat an eye. It's just, there's some places in the world where it's part of culture, and it takes it takes years, if not decades, to change that. Maybe like you said, like the younger generation, they see it, because a lot of the younger generation in a lot of developing countries, they go to US, they go to Europe, Australia, and they see how things are. And then when they go back, they're like, okay, these are things we need to work on. But it takes time. It takes generations. This isn't, it's not overnight.
Totally. And the thing is with Indonesia, it's just very complex. It's their biggest GDP. They export palm oil. And I think India and China are big consumers of palm oil. I know the EU's pushed back using palm oil in their biofuel because of deforestation going on in Indonesia. So things are changing. It's not moving fast enough for me and these species. But there are a lot of great people on the ground within the LOSA ecosystem doing some great work. And so hopefully we can just, hold our ground, so to speak, and keep these systems in place until these industries do reform.
So I know you have to go soon, so I just have a couple of more questions for you, and then I know there's some homeschooling going on, so I don't want to get in the way of that. But
no, I've just relocated off. I've just moved, but it seems to be okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So do you think right now is the best time or the worst time to be a photographer?
Well, I think it's a great time.
In the sense that it's so saturated, right? Like you said, everyone with an iPhone thinks he's a photographer nowadays, and there's social media. So there's all these pluses and there's all these minuses. I feel like it's harder to, to have your stuff seen on the one hand, but on the other hand, you have the opportunity to have it seen. So I don't know. What do you think?
I think, like I said, I think we're at a crossroads now of basically crossroads of the survival of the human race with runaway climate change, and so I think it's a really important time. There's never been a more important time to be here as a photographer. That said, obviously with all these devices, the industry has changed, and you have to be very creative in how you're going to make money as a photographer. A lot of avenues have dried up. A lot of the media outlets, a lot of magazines, they're just not there anymore. So you just have to be very creative in managing, and it comes down to the old story. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Having relationships with people in places that you can actually move your material, and just align yourself with the right groups and do good work. And I think people will appreciate that. But yeah, I think it's a really important time as a photojournalist to really, these images I do take, I think people now are even sort of really starting to pay more attention. The amount of comments I get and people really want to know about these issues. They want to be informed, because there's a lot of stuff is not readily available for people to read about it. So I think just even with my Instagram, I can just highlight issues that people wouldn't have even thought about, and it's a learning platform for myself as well. I think it's needed.
Yeah, I think I didn't phrase the question correctly. It was more like, is it the worst time or the best time to maybe to get into photography, to start being a photographer, since like it's such a saturated, like the people who are already established like yourself and many other photographers, it's obviously the best time because you have such huge platforms where 10, 15 years ago, those platforms didn't even exist. So I apologize. I didn't phrase that correctly. But,
sorry. And I probably wasn't listening as well. I was just moving. Like I think that every industry is saturated. Every year there's more and more people on the planet. It's a busy world. The Lonely Planet's not very lonely. I remember I started backpacking, used to get my Lonely Planet travel guide, and then in about 2000, I remember everywhere I went, it's just like, my God, the world's busy. There's people everywhere. But before that, I think if people want to follow their passion and get into photography, there's always a way. There's a will, there's a way. But it's not easy. But it's not necessarily the best way to live one's life is take the easy road. I don't think you'd be really satisfied, would you?
No.
Well, I wouldn't be anyway.
Yeah.
And that's my reality. The easy road's too easy, mate. You wouldn't, at the end of the day, when you sit down and put your feet up and have a cold beer, you just go, but it tastes much better when you've done the hard yards. So I don't know. I'm a bit old school on that, maybe.
And I agree. I don't think any fruitful development comes from having an easy life. I think the
Yeah,
growth comes from hardships, not nothing horrific, but just
yeah,
struggling, hardships, and bettering yourself through some sort of development. That's I think that's where true growth comes from. So I'm with you
yeah. I
100%.
think too much comfort's no good for anybody.
No,
I
no.
think people need to get out of their comfort zone and get a bit uncomfortable, and that's where you'll find the sort of the sort of the real moments in life that make you realize it's great to be alive, and that's what it's all about. And part of my work, I have my personal interest. I want to go to these places. I have a curious mind. I want to see these things, and I you know, throughout my whole career, I've documented a lot of negative things, as you've seen on my Instagram. But at the same time, I set up a small travel company called Out There with Paul Hilton. It's a bit of a cheesy name, but my business partner wanted it, and where I take small groups of 6 to 8 people that are into conservation and wildlife and put them into these situations where they get up close and personal with orangutans or with cetaceans. And I think that's just amazing. Now I've had those privileges to be able to do that, to swim with blue whales, and with a few people that really want to have an experience like that. So yeah, I think anything's possible. Just you've got to believe it, I suppose.
A calm sea never made a skilled sailor. That's a quote I always liked.
And there you go. Exactly. Yeah.
So since most governments seem to be completely either corrupt or impotent or incompetent, what is the number one thing people can do to help animals in the ocean?
In the ocean.
Yeah, like
Wow.
individuals. What's the
just cut down
everyday
on this everyday thing to help the oceans. Cut down on your seafood consumption. That's a great start. And if you do want to consume seafood, then really inform yourself and check out how it's caught, line caught, pole and line caught. Try and stay away from anything that's caught on longliners, purseine netting. Just think about the bycatch. Now, I know a lot of people here, they eat prawns, and I've eaten prawns over the years because my brother-in-law has run a prawn trawler, and there's a huge bycatch. There's 50-60% bycatch for every time they catch these prawns, and so those
like
industries
1 kilo,
need
5 kilos, right? It's like for every kilo caught, there's 5 kilos of bycatch, something like that.
Yeah, even higher, I think, with prawns, or you call them shrimps over there. So
Yeah.
I just think, people need to really look at, how they're caught and reduce. Just, you don't need so much animal protein. And I don't expect people to be vegans, but just think about how the food got to your plate, what was the process, and think about what you want to support and how you want to support it. And because every time you spend your dollars, you're supporting a industry, whether it be the dairy, meat industry, or just less is more, basically.
Less is more. Yeah, less consumption of everything, less consumption of animals, of material goods. Just
There you go. That's it. Yeah.
we are
Simplify your life.
consumers.
We don't. Yeah. Just don't need much to be happy. But and it's easy for us to for me to sit here and say I've grown up in the West. I was born into a privileged life, but I think just think about the dollars you spend and do you really need it? Yeah, I know I do jump on planes, and sometimes I'm sort of struggle with that, the carbon footprint. I offset wherever I can. I know Qantas, obviously now I'm living here, Qantas has a good carbon credits program, and I pay that wherever I can. I'm basically vegan. I just do what I can, and look, no one's perfect. We're all hypocrites. There's some kind. We just, wherever you draw your line in the sand, you do what you can, and I don't really judge anyone else for how they eat or what they do. It's their choice. At the end of the day, you have to live with it. And once again, people just need to look in the mirror now and again. Just keep yourself in check.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's, maybe I'm wrong, but I think there's going to be a moment in time. It's kind of like how we have COVID right now, and you're staying at home to keep other people safe. Even if you're asymptomatic, you're fine, nothing will happen to you. You're putting on a mask, and again, you're keeping the herd around you safe. And I think it's going to be similar, maybe with meat at some point, where okay, I can consume what I want, but by hurting the environment and by exacerbating climate change, runaway permafrost, etc., I'm hurting the collective. So I wonder if there's going to be some sort of a tipping point where, like, okay, we need to all look out for each other. So we need to make better food choices, better consumption choices. I mean, I don't know how that's going to work in a capitalistic free market society, but I think there is going to be some sort of a tipping point where things will change. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Well, less meat consumption, really, because ultimately the carbon footprint from meat and dairy is bigger than the whole transport industry. I think if people could just cut down, that's a huge start right there.
Yeah, I totally agree. So Paul, I've already taken up more time than I told you I would take up, so I don't want to take up any more of it.
No, it's good. I hope you found it enjoyable. I hope I gave you something that your listeners will appreciate. Yeah.
100%.
Okay.
Okay. People find you on the internet, on social media.
Yeah, just on my Instagram and Paul Hilton Photo. I do have a website, but it's really outdated. I think Instagram right now is the best bet to read about some of my work and learn about some of the issues I've been working on. And if they wanted more details, they can always DM me and we can talk more there.
Yeah, and I'll add it in the show notes as well. So again, I want to thank you for coming on. We need more people like you, that have some sort of a bigger agenda in mind, that work for conservation. So I'm happy, and I'm sure the listeners are happy that people like you exist, and they want to leave the world better than what they found it. So thank you.
Yeah, well, we try, mate. Well, thank you for reaching out and asking for a chat. I know it took a while to get there so we can actually connect, but no, I've enjoyed it, mate. Excellent. Thanks for your time.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks so much.